My Chemical Romance, part of the alternative rock emo royalty during the noughties, and as far as I'm concerned, the best of that lot, their ambition, their the adrenaline rush, just all of that is what easily puts them in the music history books for me. And when it comes trying to figure out what their best album is, it's always been their sophomore record, Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge. Both when I heard it and now, it's still unlike anything I've ever heard. Had I have made this video a year ago, the tone would be a bit different because in their breakup back in March of 2013, but they're back. Granted, it didn't go without a hitch. There's this whole pandemic thing, I don't know if you heard about that. I mean, their 2020 tour's been pushed back, but I think we're all pretty thankful that in one way or another that they're back. You get that? So we joke about their song. It's coming up to Halloween, so it couldn't be more of an appropriate time to talk about this album at length. So with that out of the way, if that out of the way, hello and welcome. I'm Liam, the music reviewer, and oh, you're awake, you're alright. Pandemic? 100 gigs? What are you talking about? Let's rank every track from My Chemical Romance's Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge. Let's go! Before we dive right in, I want to clear up two things about this ranking and how we're going to go about doing it. First of all, it's about the album's concept, and this widely shared Gerard Way quote will help to clear up a lot more than I can.
It is the story of a man and a woman who are separated by death in a gunfight, and he goes to hell, only to realise by the devil telling him that she's still alive. The devil says he can be with her again if he brings the devil the souls of 1,000 evil men, and the man agrees to do it. And so the devil hands him a gun.
Think of it as an emo rendition of that one Futurama episode where Fry makes a deal with the devil. But anyway, the MC Army, I think that's what the stands call themselves. They all have their own interpretations of each track, what it means in the overarching plot, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to go by what I make of each song, what I think it stands for in the story. Granted, a lot of my interpretations are going to kind of align with yours. Secondly is the tracks I'm choosing not to include in this ranking. There's two. The first is Interlude because, surprise surprise, it's an interlude, and the second is Burn Me in Black, which is a demo, so I don't feel right comparing it to like fully fledged, produced, mastered songs, but there will be those that argue that it's a pretty vital song to the album because of what it represents in the greater plot and story. So I just wanted to bring it up so it didn't seem like I don't know what I'm talking about. I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about, but just get on with the ranking.
In the middle of a gunfight, in the center of a restaurant.
I have a love or hate relationship with this song and its imagery, which all stems from the prison concept. I think it mostly works in its favour, like in the second verse, where the protagonist is just thinking about all the ways that he can end his misery, but then in other ways, including that second verse, some of the imagery, like the line about doing push-ups and drag, just always strike me as a little janky, maybe a little bit tasteless, but that's not for this cis guy to say. That's mainly a nitpick though, because out with that, this song just absolutely rips and tears. Sonically, if you ignore that annoying aura noise in the second verse, which by the way, that verse is just blessed and cursed in equal regards, but it's just such an energetic song. I just love that ticking time bomb of a bridge where Gerard goes,
Life is but a dream for the dead.
So gratifying. But at the end of the day, with these kind of videos, you're always going to have a song that takes the bottom place in the list. But like most of my ranked videos, it's more of a case of least favourite as opposed to worst. And I would still happily chuck this song on in the car while going 80 miles per hour down a motorway. Is that a normal speed to be going down a motorway? I don't know how to drive. The final single from Three Cheers, The Ghost of You, definitely is a song that acts as a sign of things to come, at the very least when it comes to the music video, which has the scope and no doubt the budget that every My Chemical video would have from that point on. Every My Chemical Romance album has at least one big ballad. Black Parade's got I Don't Love You, for better or worse Danger Days has Sing, and Three Cheers has The Ghost of You. Will I say it's as good as I Don't Love You? I'll wait for the inevitable Black Parade ranking video for that one. I do like The Ghost of You though, a fair amount actually. It's one of the more mellower songs on this album though, considering its company that's not saying that much. Like much of the record, the chorus is still pretty lofty and in your face, but the verses are closer to being Deftones-esque with those reverb heavy guitars. With the song being so grief ridden, it's pretty effective in allowing the melancholy to sink in, with the chorus just pouring salt in the wound. On another note, I'm really surprised that no emo cloud rap artist has gone ahead and sampled the bridge from this song for a track. It's just begging to be used in that big moody snare heavy tune.
Goth Boy Click.
If I fall.
Of course, being second bottom in this ranking, I don't think this track is completely flawless. I'm not a big fan of how The Ghost of You ends pretty abruptly. It always feels like a bit of a blue ball moment. I don't mean lyrically. It would make sense why a song of this nature would cut out mid-sentence. It just fades out for 2 seconds and never gets to quite haunt for as long as it should. So yeah, I may get myself into some hot water for having this one so low, but don't get it twisted, I dig this song a lot. Just not as much as other songs on Free Cheers, I'm afraid. It's so easy to hit out of this comparison considering it was the early 2000s, but this song shares a branch on the Queens of the Stone Age family tree, especially with those guitars and how they're tuned. The song just feels like you're just speeding down the motorway like on some like F-Zero track while trying to hold a conversation on your car's loudspeaker. Gerard just like hollering out the window like some dog going, "You're beautiful." It's just such a fucking whirlwind of a song. It's the kind of track that I can imagine would fit pretty well in a Tony Hawk Pro Skater game, and thankfully it's as enjoyable to dive into as it is to listen to it. What I find to be most interesting is how for the first time, and as far as I'm aware the only time, the perspective alternates back and forth between the protagonist and the lover. Given that it's the second song in the track listing, having this sincerity and chemistry helps you to buy into why this is all going down. The bridge on here is pretty fantastic. I especially like the line, "Some might say we are made from the sharpest things you say." Gerard just sounds like he's having a ridiculous amount of fun, and that is basically what this song is, a ridiculous amount of fun.
He calls the mansion not a house but a tomb. He's always choking from the stench and the fume.
Like any artist, My Chemical Romance are inspired and influenced by a myriad of different sources, some of them being graphic novels and mainly horror. That latter one especially is just in every fibre of this album, especially that artwork as well, which is just iconic. But it also goes some way to explaining how Gerard Way tells his stories, and To the End is one of the finest examples of this. Drawn most explicitly from William Faulkner's short story A Rose from Emily, there's a brilliant contrast with regards to weddings and wakes, which is fairly bleak but also quite gallows in its humour. It's essentially the vows two people make to each other taken as far as they possibly can be. The priest never does ask you if you're willing to kill 1,000 people for the person you love, but maybe worth keeping in mind before you propose. Of course, the lyrics are only as good as the performances themselves, and Gerard is happy to have them up in this theatrical fashion. I love the way in which he says, "Send my resignation to the bride in the broom." He sounds like he's just like ran up a flight of stairs. It's just so ridiculous, but works to great effect. It's not only impressive, but it acts as just an example of the ethos My Chemical Romance have, where they just want to make sure that every inch of this gothic architecture that they've made is as interesting as it possibly can be. While Free Cheers does have a concept, not everything about it is purely fictional, and Jet Set Life is the most autobiographical of them all. If you're privy to what Jet Set Life usually entails, you'll know before even listening to it the tales of struggle that it's going to dive into. Gerard Way's struggles with alcohol and drugs are well documented, specifically in the video diary turned documentary Life in the Murder Scene.
It made me suicidal, which is, you know, I had been suicidal a couple times in my life, and not this bad. Get to the point where you start thinking about it as an escape route. That's when it gets serious. When you're like, well, if anything really bad ever happens, I'll just do this and it'll be fine and I'll be able to go away. So that was where booze and pills had gotten.
The way in which Gerard envisions and characterises this addiction as a woman who will torture him like an insect is definitely a visceral metaphor, a very powerful one at that, and one that left a mighty impression on me first time I heard it. The pre-chorus is equally as impactful for me. I always feel pretty moved when the protagonist has this earnest moment of wishing to lie by the lover he's killing for. Some additional notes, that bridge reminds me a little bit of Weezer. Specifically, Do You Want to Get High's opening? Someone smarter and more handsome than me can try and figure that out. I also really love the pronunciation of Hotel Buena Muerte. Like, I could just listen to that for hours on end. Actually, I have. Jokes aside, one of My Chemical Romance's most deeply personal songs, not just on this album, but out of their entire discography. One of the most explicit songs in terms of how it pertains to the album's story. You might think because it's not higher up in the ranking that must reflect on the story not being quite as good as it possibly can be, but that could not be further from the truth. In fact, this explicitness works in Hang 'Em High's favour, especially with that bridge, a moment you can pinpoint as one of the album's most tense, as the protagonist meets the woman he's been killing for. It's like that moment in Spider-Verse where Kingpin's family recoils in fear after seeing what he's done and become, just with a lot more eyeliner and dead bodies. Well, maybe just an equal amount of dead bodies. I really love what Gerard does with his vocal register on here. He's never one to be conventional or play it safe, and that's especially true in Hang 'Em High. The way in which he delivers lines like "by the grace of God" feels like it's about to be placed in the very coffin he alludes to moments earlier. The screamo tidings of their debut are turned down dramatically in Free Cheers, but Hang 'Em High has some modest showboating of this delivery to really amp up the grisliness of it all. I think in terms of how it's introduced, Hang 'Em High has my favourite chorus on the entire album. There's some teasing earlier on in the song, but when it actually comes in with this parade of chugging guitars, just so satisfying. It gets the final leg of this album kicked off in a tremendous fashion. But anyway, on to the next song in this ranking, and
you like D&D, Audrey Hepburn, Fangoria, Harry Houdini, and croquet. You can't swim, you can't dance, and you don't know karate. Face it, you're never gonna make it.
I don't want to make it. I just wanna. It feels like every decade has an anthem for the younger generation. You go far as back as like the Ramones with "I Want to Be Sedated." You can go for something like literally anything Nirvana ever put out. There's always something that for teenagers, like you've got like a musical middle finger for your parents, for society, for authority, for whatever, and I don't really know what would operate as that nowadays for the younger generation. I'm obviously like 50 years old in the grand scheme of things, but back when I was growing up in the noughties, this was the weirdo anthem. There was probably a time where I would be sour on this song for how it was literally everywhere when I was growing up. MTV Rocks and Kerrang would play this repeatedly in their channels, pop punk karaoke nights. It's the most streamed track on Free Cheers, and My Chemical Romance's third most popular song behind Welcome to the Black Parade and Teenagers. Yet, despite all of that, I still find this track to be as much of a blast as I did when I discovered it as a teen. Out of all the songs on Free Cheers, I'm Not Okay is the most standalone, given that it's not super essential in a narrative, which probably led to a fair chunk of its popularity. That's not to say there isn't anything worth diving into lyrically. I'm Not Okay always spoke to me as a track about putting the importance of other people's well-beings before your own, until you just crack under the pressure from all of this emotional and physical exhaustion. It may be nothing profound, but simplicity is a spice of life, and everyone, no matter how sturdy they are, is able to relate to a moment where they just couldn't keep up a guise of being alright emotionally, which is, to go full circle, why it became the anthem that it did. On the flip side, with all of that in mind, it's just a fun as fuck song to sing along to. I cannot wait for karaoke to be a thing again, or just parties in general, because this is just, so much fun to sing along to, and especially that sarcastic as fuck bridge is just, sheer joy. It's the most popular song on Free Cheers or Sweet Revenge, but there's a reason for that. It's just really good. If you couldn't tell already, my favourite moments on Free Cheers tend to be the ones where Gerard's fictional stories and his very real struggles intersect, and Thank You for the Venom is one of those moments from start to finish. Following up interlude where Gerard tries his best Tom York impression, Thank You for the Venom should be part of any welcoming package for first time My Chemical Romance listeners. Not only is it one of the band's most high octane tracks, but it's also the perfect example of the band's flair for the dramatic and sardonic, showcasing why the band were and still are such a comfort for so many teenagers and young adults. Surprisingly enough, for an album with revenge in its title, this track focuses on vengeance a hell of a lot. While it definitely aims its sights on religion, everyone's a target as far as Gerard is concerned, everyone out to get him instead of helping, whether it be the concept of a higher power or his vice with alcohol and drugs. Instead of this being a purely negative scenario, Gerard contorts it into a hopeful one. Much like the protagonist taking on everyone including the devil, Gerard sees those who threaten to do him harm or stand in his way and goes, good luck, you need it. While it's lyrically buff, I do have to put some attention on the performances, which are probably the most overwhelming on the entire record, sporting an appealing metalcore lick of paint, especially with those opening guitars. It's relentless all the way through, even the pre-chorus where it feels like the band are starting to let things calm down a little bit. That's just a moment for them to like put the gas down to bubbling before turning it all the way back up, just to like put boiled starchy water all over the worktop. Need to stop writing these scripts on an empty stomach. It's always really interesting to see what artists make of their own work, and back in 2013 when reflecting on Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge, Gerard Way did say that this was his favourite song of the lot, and it's not hard to see why. The outro to this is just a lot. I can't imagine how life affirming it must be to see this song performed live when it hits in, because just from the recording alone, I get these phantom bumps like I'm swaying in a crowd that's just crying to be experienced in that fashion. It definitely helps that it plays really well into the story. The sheer adamance of the protagonist that he'll be reunited with his lover is pretty poignant, considering what is about to unfold in the following song. I see some takes that this is a moment where the protagonist is undergoing some serious depression, and while I'm not here to argue whether that is or isn't the case, I feel with how triumphant this song is and how it resonates, it's more of a premature victory lap than anything. I really wouldn't be surprised if this was seen by the band as a predecessor of sorts to Welcome to the Black Parade. Listen to this song and listen to Black Parade and tell me that the same building blocks for that euphoria aren't evident here. With the nature of the two songs that follow it, this does feel like one of the most quote-unquote positive songs on the album. In a just world, this song would be the ending of the entire record. There'd be some like dialogue between the protagonist and the lover, and it would go on to be forever happy and just reunited and all that, but I must emphasise that in a just world. The penultimate track of Three Cheers, Cemetery Drive, was never a bad song in my eyes, but it wasn't until I started preparing for this video and listening to it in such detail that the tragic beauty of it just became just so apparent to me. I could not ignore it anymore. There were always bits to me that always kind of just stood out, like the opening bell tolls and that line in the second verse about slitting your wrist. Like, it kind of felt like a cheeky middle finger to the mainstream media's reaction to My Chemical Romance. But as I say, as I started listening to this in more detail and seeing how it all fit into the album's narrative, I couldn't in good conscience put this anywhere other than the tippity top of this list. It's easy to argue that Three Cheers peaks narratively with Cemetery Drive just due to how heart-wrenching it is. The lover who the protagonist has been fighting tooth, nail and other body parts for kills herself, and the way in which this is revealed is just horrible but kinda masterful. Gerard's delivery is delicate, sounding pretty sedated, which makes sense considering the hallucinatory state of the protagonist, only to turn to his trademark bombastic tone when it comes to the revelation that she was found dead on the bathroom floor. He kinda does this on the second verse in a more subtle fashion, some barely audible lines of "Are you there at all? Do you care at all?" becoming pretty ominous once you become aware of them. Where this track truly leaves me in a pile of dust is the post-chorus and outro. On paper it might just seem like a simple refrain of "Way Down," but boy, is it just so much more than that. It's hard not to visualise the scenario of the lover being buried, each spade full of soil both weighing on her dead body, and the protagonist as he slowly comes to terms with the reality of his actions. The guitars that accompany these two sections only go to shatter my heart even more. All the components that I've mentioned so far just come together to make this song that feels like a great episode of TV, more specifically like the second last episode of a season, where you're just left scratching your head for the next week, jumping on forum boards trying to figure out what is going down, trying to break down every last detail. And to me, that's basically why I find this song to just be so utterly fantastic.
Long ago, just like a hearse, you died to get in again.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Helena is a perfect song, and that might be a little bit funny to you considering it's number 2 on this list, but just hear me out, because those hushed, gaspy vocals from Gerard in the opening seconds, to the backing vocals in general, to those guitars that disappear and then re-emerge after the chorus with a vengeance. Oh, this is just, I could assemble the greatest musical minds on the planet, both living and dead, and they just would not be able to improve on this song no matter how hard they tried. For a band that formed in the aftermath of 9/11, it comes as no surprise how visceral in their misery My Chemical Romance can be, and Helena is no exception. Written as a tribute to Gerard and Mickey Way's grandmother, this track is grief in its rawest form, to the point where it becomes a pretty upsetting listen if you found yourself going through the same scenario. I can personally vouch for this, as Helena and the Yeah 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 Skeletons were in heavy rotation following the passing of my gran in 2013. My Chemical Romance are an unconventional band, and by that extension, Helena is an unconventional tribute song, a fair chunk dedicated to the self-destruction and pain that follows this passing. When you've got this song about wishing for death so that you could be reunited with someone you love, but acknowledging that it's best to say goodbye, and then having that in context of the album's greater narrative where the opposite happens, along with this cathartic instrumentation. Absolute gut punch for the pain the rest of the album has in store for you, but with all of that, plus some heart-wrenching lines like "Came a time when every starfall brought you to tears again," I'm left no other option but to say that there are very few rock albums from the 2000s that can claim to have an opener as good as Three Cheers. It doesn't matter whether you think this is emo or pop punk or even post-hardcore of all things, because at the end of the day, when it comes down to how emotionally potent it is, when it comes to its importance in the narrative, when it just comes down to how perfectly constructed it is, Helena is one of the most perfect songs of the noughties as far as I'm concerned, and somehow there's one song on this album that still manages to beat it out. This is it, the captain's last battle cry before he goes down with his ship. The closer to Three Cheers that just, I'm always surprised that it exists in the way that it does, because Three Cheers is a super active album, yet the band have kept this little bottle of adrenaline stashed away just for this moment, and they use every last ounce of energy that they can possibly muster up. It's just got all the trademarks of a fantastic finish, and it's got bombast, an uproar, and a $50 Olive Garden voucher. With references to Macbeth, it should really come as no surprise that the ending to this tale isn't a lovely one, much closer to a Shakespearean tragedy. As it turns out, the devil turns out to not be very trustworthy, and the last evil man the protagonist must kill is himself. With both the lover and the protagonist dead, it could be seen as a bittersweet reunion for them in hell, but my take has always been that they never meet again, the whole murder rampage of it being pretty unfruitful. If you were the devil, you'd probably choose that as the ultimate act of punishment. It makes the protagonist's denial hurt all the more as he screams "I tried" and assures his lover that they will dance and love again. The anguish is just so palatable that I get the phantom pain of 2 bullets at the back of my head. As far as it goes narratively, this song is just, but it's not slacking sonically either. It is phased perfectly to the point where it can feel like 3 or 4 different songs stitched together like some Tim Burton creation, but it is, yeah, there's just a seamlessness quality to it all. The song ebbs and flows between the momentum of a getaway car and a little waltz, but I never get any whiplash from it. When it comes to stories, a great ending can salvage a poor opening or a poor midsection. Three Cheers doesn't have a poor opening or a poor midsection, yet its finale is no less impressive. It is one of my go-to examples for when I want to point out an album that goes out with a bang, that just ends on the best note possible. This is the best song on Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge, and just one of the best songs that My Chemical Romance have ever made. And there we have it, every song from Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge ranked. Hopefully you've enjoyed this and I've backed myself up enough and I'm not looking too scary just now, but I'm more excited to see what your rankings are, especially because I'm sure there'll be some like cheeky sod out there that's just going to put their ranking as being the complete opposite of mine. If you like this video, then consider dropping a like. If you're not subscribed, maybe subscribe as well if that's something you want to do. And if you're feeling particularly spitable, then you can maybe go support me on Patreon. Just supports the channel, and there's some extra goodies like being included in the credits of all of my videos. But thank you for watching. Have a great Halloween, stay safe, stay hydrated, so long, and good night.